Gentlemen, today we are back in SatisFACTORY. Our goal is to pick up where we left off and ascend further into the third dimension. Last time, you painfully watched as I developed a factory that was completely devoid of any foundations, but this time you will see me revolt against my two-dimensional Factorio brain and repent for my sins. To aid in this goal, I have hired a fully certified diagnosed perfectionist, Hannah. It was me, by the way. I diagnosed her. Hannah has not played SatisFACTORY, but she has played Factorio. As such, it is my job to indoctrinate and show her the ropes. So, let's get started. Now, as stated before, Hannah has played Factorio. What this means is that she's well aware of how inputs and outputs work and that you need power and storage and blah blah blah. But the problem was that she hasn't touched Factorio in several years. So, while she was aware of the overall concepts, the math conversions and practicality of things still felt a little bit foreign, and so, throwing her straight into the factory probably wasn't gonna go too well. What she needed was a little bit of practice. To facilitate growth, I had her start off by making an assembly line that would produce something simple. Something like heavy modular frames.
What?
Nah, I'm just kidding. I just had her make some concrete. But while she was doing this, I wanted her to not fall into the two-dimensional trap that I had been stuck in, and rather embrace using walls and multiple levels. Luckily, she caught on pretty quick. With Hannah on board, it was now time to begin planning. The idea that we came up with for this new factory was to have multiple levels where each floor was responsible for crafting a very specific tier of recipes. So the first floor would make tier 1 parts and feed them into the second floor, which made 2 tier parts that fed into the third floor, and so on. Each floor would be divided into rooms that would be responsible for making a single part each. If this concept looks familiar, it's because it is. It was derived from the city block concept that was used in late game Factorio. Yeah, you weren't expecting that, were ya? But how were we gonna get resources to all of these levels? Furthermore, how are we gonna get resources to the entire factory to begin with? We were gonna need tons of new resource nodes, and the best ones that we found were really fucking far. Well, here's what we decided. Our plan was to firstly smelt the raw ore at the locations of the nodes. We would then hook it up to a train station nearby, and then have that train deliver it to the main factory. We planned on making a basement level below level 1 that would have plenty of space to house several train stations. All of the resources from the trains would then be fed into a vertical bus located at the front of the factory that could then be fed into each one of the levels. So that was our plan, but now we actually had to fucking do it. And the only place to start was with the raw resources. The first and most obvious resource was iron, and luckily for us, it was literally right above our factory. All of the nodes were pure, which meant there was going to be a ton of iron that we could use, arguably too much. But nevertheless, we proceeded with sticking to the plan, which meant that we needed to smelt all of the ore on site. While building our smelting array, the voices of the second dimension whispered to me and begged me to build everything in a singular plane of existence.
I want you to make that shit flat as a pancake.
Ah! I'll be honest, if it wasn't for Hannah, I probably would have made all of this just flat. Luckily for me, she was there to stomp out any flat-minded dissent and instead encouraged us to make this.
All right.
For a first attempt at stacking, not bad. But while we were making this, we had a slight issue. We had 4 lines of iron and 4 levels of smelters, but only 3 of those levels were actually working. We checked their power, and they had it. We checked if they had recipes, and they did. We checked to see if their inputs were connected, and they were. What the fuck, man? What on earth was happening?
Why is it idle? It's not getting iron ore. Why is it not getting iron ore?
Well, I'm sure a few of you can already see the issue.
Huh?
Yep, the bottom line was not iron, and instead it was copper the entire time. Luckily though, this turned out to be quite the blessing. You see, there was an alternate recipe I got in the last video for iron ingots. It mixed copper and iron together to make more iron. So after replacing the smelters with foundries, the iron production was done. Now we just needed to make the train station. I was actually quite excited for this part because in Factorio, I fucking love trains, and I assumed that they would work relatively similar in this game. So after finding a good spot to make it, we laid the foundations, and then we made our first train station.
There's not enough space on the rails to fit the locomotives.
Here, I have a solution for you. What if I did this? I fell.
Now, instead of placing down a few random boxes to the side of the train, this game actually has a built-in system for freight management logistics. Once the train docks, it will automatically load or unload depending on your settings. Very nice. But now came the issue of making the railway. The SatisFACTORY train system is quite intuitive and very easy to make work, but trying to make it look pretty was pretty tedious. For me. I'm sure that some of you guys are screaming right now, but seriously, trying to space the foundations at just the right angle was really fucking annoying. Anyways, so after way too much time had passed, the railway was finally connected to the main factory.
I want to drive the train.
All right. If you're gonna drive the train, then I'm gonna do something.
Are you ready?
Yeah. Break his spacebar.
I put that buffer there.
What buffer? Oh, and saying that you were that I needed to. I forgot I was supposed to do that.
Once we had established that the train actually worked, we fixed it up and made it look nice. Now all we had to do was make the train station to unload the resources. And again, with these freight things, it made it super easy to set up. I could just set it and forget it.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Once they were placed, we would never need to worry about resource management again. Right? And with that, the iron ingots had been taken care of. With the recipes we had, on this level, iron ingots were only going to be used to make screws and iron plates. Unfortunately, our recipe for iron plates also needed plastic, so all we could make at this point was just the screws. Now, I am well aware that the less screws you use, the better off you are. However, the amount of alternate recipes we had didn't really give us a whole lot of confidence that we could just skip out on screws entirely. And here is where my gross negligence of making blueprints in the past really started to show, because I didn't have any. So needless to say, we had to make some blueprints. Once those were made, we did some copy pasta and blammo, screws had been automated. Now it was time for the iron plates. And as I stated before, these were gonna need plastic, which was the second resource along with rubber that we needed to get. And if you remember from last time, I had already made a ton of plastic, but the main problem was that it was on the complete opposite side of the map. So here we had a few options. Either A, we could try and make a new oil base that produced plastic and then just route it to the new train we made, or B, we could try and make a stupidly long road that connects our existing plastic to the new factory. We decided to go with option B. But with that option, do we use a train and have it transport things in the quickest, most reliable way possible, or should we make it into a highway where we'll need to use multiple trucks that each need their own fuel, their own station, a recorded path, and overall just introduces a large margin of error? I think we can all agree that trucks make the most sense here.
Say what?
And so we got started on making the highway. This had some unforeseeable benefits.
Oh, now's your chance. Go, run. Good boy.
Pet the flying manta. As we laid the foundations for the road, we realized that this distance would take fucking ages to cover if we ever needed to go from one spot to the next. What we needed was a way to get from our new factory to the oil base in as little time as possible. Our solution? The Hypertube Man Cannon. For those of you that are unaware, the game does not allow you to stack hypertube entrances back to back. However, some blessed genius out there discovered a way to circumnavigate this predicament entirely, allowing us to achieve near supersonic speeds.
Oh my god, I didn't even see you.
The only issue we had with this was accidentally getting sucked in when we didn't want to.
Wow.
No.
Taking you back
Look
to
at how
the
tall
truck.
this truck is.
And so, for the following 2 hours after the man cannon had been established, I spent my time officially walling it off. While I was doing that, Hannah had the idea to create a switch, and that way we could turn it on or we could turn it off. She's a smart cookie. With the man cannons closed off and no accidental suckings taking place, we were ready to program the trucks. Was it straight most of the way? Yes it was. Did my ass pucker when I went around the corners? Also yes. Did I watch Hannah hit a light pole? Yep. And did we complete the route successfully? Yes. Plastic and rubber were now available at the new base, and with that, we could finally make the iron plates. This part was actually pretty quick, all things considered, because of the assembler blueprint that I had made just prior. So we hooked it up to the dimensional depots, routed it to the next floor, and we were finally ready to tackle the next main resource. The biggest and arguably the most important resource that we needed was steel. I would say that approximately every fucking alternate recipe that we got replaced something with a steel-based item. As such, we thought it would be in our best interest to get as much steel as we could possibly manage. What this meant was finding a shitload of iron nodes and hooking them up with some coal. We found that the nearest motherlode of iron was up in the desert biome, and that the nearest coal was Man, where the fuck is the coal? Oh, here we go. All right, let's see. Well, shit, that's not gonna work. How were we gonna make steel if we didn't have coal? I'll be honest, I was not about to make another fucking road like we did for the plastic just to bring a little coal to the iron. But what other option did we have? Well, I'll tell ya. Instead of coal, we could use coke. Turns out that you can refine oil into a coal alternative. And it just so happens to be that this alternate recipe that uses coke also makes a fuck ton of steel. Our steel manufacturing plant was going to be centralized around the oil location, and then a secondary train station would be assembled to allow for quick and easy transportation. But the first step in building our steel factory wasn't to build. No. The first real step was to relocate the natives permanently. Oh, hey, look at that, a Mercer sphere. Now that those dirty animals weren't stinking up the place, we had to decide how we were gonna get the iron to the oil. Although the oil was a hell of a lot closer to the iron than the coal was, there was still a significant amount of ground to cover. Having said that, it wasn't enough ground to warrant building an entire new train station. The ground was relatively flat as it was, and because we were going to be refining oil, building another truck station seemed like the obvious choice. For some reason, it seems like most people hate trucks, but honestly, I don't see the issue. Anyway, so after deciding on using trucks, we got to work. First up was getting our grubby hands on some of that coke. This process is achieved by refining oil into resin and heavy oil residue, which is then refined into petroleum coke. Those of you that recommended using the sink to dispose of the resin directly, as opposed to the complex system that I had made in the last video, hats off to you. It was fucking awesome. After this, we laid out a sufficient line of assemblers that the petroleum coke was then evenly dispersed into, and now all we needed was the iron.
Oh, baby, you built that one off-centered.
But before we could do that, we needed to make a truck station, and the truck station was gonna need fuel. Luckily, we had like a gazillion oil to work with, so we made a very neat system that was incredibly unoptimized, but made us the fuel that we needed. Okay.
Good luck.
What? What? Good luck. With the trucks made, we could now get the iron. There were 6 normal iron nodes and 2 inputs to the truck stations. After doing some math and some power charge shenanigans, we got 2 tier 4 belts full of iron. You got beef? Do you have something? Ow! This iron got bussed over to the oil base, where it would then be put into the assemblers and then into the train station. We hooked the train station here to the one at the iron base, which would then go to the main base, and then we were done. Yeah, don't worry about that. Now here is where we made what is called in the biz a big boo-boo. When we had built our steel train station, we had planned on using the same train as the iron. What this meant was that we needed to add 2 more carts to the existing train. What we unfortunately neglected to pay attention to was how this would affect the existing freight layout.
Hey, whoa.
What?
Wait, is that steel? That's an iron ingot. Those are supposed to be steel ingots. This is completely full of iron. Wait. Why is this full of iron? Okay, I gotta follow this.
Sorry to hear that. What?
Yeah, so long story short, I needed to revise both steel and the iron freight sections to maintain the unloading order at the main base. This took way longer than I'd like to admit, but once I was done revising everything, we now had steel at the main base, and all that was left was copper and Caterium. Of all the resources thus far, it felt to me like these were going to be used the least, especially considering that, for the most part, the number 1 recipe that they're usually used for is wire or quick wire, which ultimately doesn't get used too much. Or do they? Regardless, we needed the resources to be routed to the base, and here's where we were faced with the biggest choice thus far. Do we choose to maintain an effort of grabbing new resource nodes and expanding the factory, or do we cannibalize the resources from the main bus? The logistics of this decision obviously weren't the hard part. In fact, it would be very easy and convenient to shut down the bus and to use those resources into the main factory. No, this was not the hard part. The difficult decision was based on principle. This bus was my baby. This bus represented hours of obsolete thinking that was carried over from Factorio. By killing the bus, I was admitting that the bus didn't work.
I'm sorry, boy.
And honestly, I wasn't sure if I had it in me to destroy it. Taking the resources off the main bus was so stinking easy. You see, we made a train station to grab the copper here, and then we routed it to another stop over here at the head of the bus, and then obviously the last stop was to the main factory. We routed the Caterium from here and here to be sent here, and this allowed us to grab copper, Caterium, and yes, we even made a freight car for steel. After setting up the train stations, things were looking pretty good. And speaking of looking pretty good, during all of this time, Hannah had put in some serious elbow grease to make sure our factory looked amazing. So, here it is. So, if we zoom out for a second, what we can see is a factory with a fair amount of resources coming in. All of these resources are distributed to the front of the factory, where we have set up lines of inputs on our highest tiered belts. From here, each level will make a variety of parts that will subsequently be sent to the floor above. Does this factory have everything we will need? No, absolutely not. Aluminum looks fucking terrifying. Now, I know that some of you guys are probably saying, well, what about concrete? That's also a tier 1 resource. And to that I say, yes it is. Aside from making foundations and walls, it appears to be used in recipes like encased steel beams, and that's really it. So because of that, I don't really think there's a need to import limestone just so we can make the... Oh, motherfucker!